Hi everyone and welcome to my very first tutorial. We are going to draw a golden retriever puppy together. I would like to show you an easy and relatively quick way to achieve a realistic effect. As always, we start with a sketch. You will find a link to the reference photo I used for this portrait below the video. Keep in mind that when drawing a realistic portrait, it's always worth using reference photos. It will be much easier to capture accurate details and bring your drawing to life. My sketch is already done. Of course, there are several ways you can create your initial outline, and I will be covering that in a separate video very soon. So I encourage you to like and subscribe to my channel. The next step is removing excess graphite. If we leave too much, it can show through the colored pencils, especially when drawing light fur, which might make the final result look a bit messy. It's less of an issue with darker fur, but since we are drawing a golden retriever with its characteristic light cream colored coat, we need to tone down the graphite. A kneaded eraser works great for this. It's soft, moldable, and you can shape it however you need. In our case, rolling it into a little cylinder works best. You can lightly roll it over the whole sketch, and it will lift just enough graphite off the paper without erasing the lines completely. The next tool we are using is an indentation tool. It has two tips, one smaller and one larger. Since we are working on medium size paper, I'm using the smaller one. With a bit of pressure, we will start marking individual hairs. Focus on the reference photo and locate the lightest areas. We are only marking the brightest hairs for now. Try to mimic exactly how the hairs look in the photo. Where they are short, we make short lines and follow their direction. Press the tool into the paper to create grooves. When we layer colored pencils over it later, those indented lines will stay white. It will save us a lot of time. Trying to color around the light hairs manually would take forever. This is also the best time to mark in the whiskers and the tiny hairs above the eyes. Moving on to the ear now. Again, use the reference photo to identify where hair strands and clumps are located and try to replicate that in your drawing. But please remember, you don't have to copy the photo exactly. And in fact, you shouldn't do this. Focus on capturing the essential features without turning it into a perfect duplicate. Pay attention to the direction and length of the fur strands. That's super important for a realistic effect. And now we move on to the rest of the muzzle. Up top, near the eyes, you will see brighter fur on the reference. Go ahead and mark that as well. Let's draw the eye now. I'm starting with dark indigo pencil to outline the eyeball and pupil. Don't press too hard at this stage, just lay down the color very gently. Now I switch to black. Because of the indigo underneath, the black will appear deeper. I reinforce the eye contour and add color to the inner and outer corners, then gently darken the pupil. It should be the darkest part of the eye. I went a little too far here, so I fixed it using a precision eraser pencil, and I highly recommend it for fine details. I adjust the lower part of the eye, then use a hazelnut brown pencil and start filling in the iris with small circular motions, leaving space where the light reflection will be. Next up is orange glaze. I use it to color over the brown layer and darken the outer edge of the iris. And back to the hazelnut brown to deepen the darkest areas around the eye. Be careful to keep your highlights clean and white. Now, dark sepia to add shadow under the upper lid and on the lower part of the eye. A touch of it can also go on the pupil to make the black richer. And now ultramarine blue. It's perfect color for areas with light reflections and for the lower lid, which is never pure black or grey. It often has a cool blue tone. Now, dark sepia to soften the surface of the eyeball. I add a touch of white. I'm using Caran Museum, but since it lightens the color quite a bit, I will need to go over them again. I return to black for the contour and pupil, and then bring in burnt sienna, layering it over the iris using circular and outward strokes. Now I add a bit more black to increase contrast and add that 3D feel to the eye. We will come back to it later. It's much easier to match the colors once we've built up some of the surrounding fur, something like 1 cm frame around the eye. Using dark sepia, I add shadows in the corners of the eye. Don't use black for this, as sepia gives a more natural look. I go back in with black now, just along the very edge of the eye, to bring out the curve and make it pop. And here you can press firmly. Now I return to the fur around the eye, starting with the darkest hairs above it. As always, keep checking the reference photo. I use a 20% ochre, since we already marked light hairs with the indentation tool. I can freely draw over them. I lay down light strokes, roughly matching the length of the reference hair, not too precise, but focused on the correct direction and flow. At this point, I noticed the eye was too saturated, so I lifted a bit of color with the eraser. Pay special attention to the area near the nose and between the eyes. The fur direction shifts a few times there. I add another layer using golden tones, then apricot. Mixing different shades helps create depth and that soft, fluffy look. Now comes burnt ochre. It's a soft, muted pinkish tone that's perfect for golden retriever's fur. It keeps the fur from looking too yellow. Adding soft pinks and light purples helps create a natural cream tone. This stage reminds me a bit of sculpting. This is 10% raw umber to darken certain patches. Don't copy the photo exactly, look at the shape of the shadows and try to recreate that. To add sparkle to the eye, I use a white Posca marker. I just slightly tap with my finger so the edges don't look too sharp. But remember to do this immediately as it dries quite fast. Back to the pinks, and the fur is starting to take shape now. Now you can clearly see the whiskers because the white grooves we made earlier remain untouched. This is way easier than trying to draw around those tiny white lines later. Back to dark sepia, and I define the upper and lower eyelids and add a few strokes beneath the eye to imitate darker hairs. Don't press too hard here, keep it quite light. Now, white again, and I place it where the light hits above and below the eye. Now I move to the second eye, following the same steps. Back for the outline and pupil, hazelnut brown for the iris, and repeat the process just like we did with the first eye. We are shaping the eyeball now, and as you can see, it's becoming more round and lifelike. To intensify the iris color, I use Caput mortuum violet, which is a brownish purple color, and as this puppy has dark brown eyes, this shade works great for that. At this point, it's best to work in layers. So apply the colors softly and let them blend naturally for that rich depth. Corners of the eye are next, inner and outer. Then back to the hazelnut brown and deepen areas that need more contrast. I define the lower lid with brown as well and add individual dark hairs around the eye. This will make layering easier later on. Now back to the soft yellow, same as before. The only thing to keep in mind is the direction and length of the fur. And if you make a mistake or apply too much color, don't worry, just leave it gently with an eraser. And now moving on to the forehead. Once again, pay attention to the direction of the fur, especially between the eyes, the bridge and sides of the nose. The fur here changes direction, length and even color. Above the eye, I leave a highlight to show where light reflects off the fur. And now I start pressing a bit harder with some pencil strokes to create darker individual hairs. It helps at depth. Notice how the closer we get to the nose, the shorter the fur gets. Along the bridge of the nose, the fur fans out like a little fan, but it's shortest right in the center. On the sides of the nose, I add the same color I used on the bridge. Using that same pencil, I draw a few hairs also on the forehead. Please take your time with this step, there is no need to rush. Colored pencil drawing is a slow process, but it's also a great patience builder. It's also good to take breaks. Stepping back helps you to see your work with fresh eyes and compare it better to the reference photo. Next color is beige, another great one for drawing golden cream colored fur. Now I focus on the area under the eyes and between the eyes and nose. There's a bit of shadow there. You will see it if you look closely at the reference. Same goes for the upper lid area toward the nose. I add some fine lines here. It's not about filling the whole area, just individual strokes. Thanks to the indentation tool, this step is much easier. I can now draw lightly and loosely, while still controlling the direction of the strokes to match the real fur pattern. Now I switch to Warm Earth 5%. It's a very beautiful, soft pinkish tone, perfect for a light fur. It balances out the yellows and helps prevent the fur from looking too yellow. To make the fur look more natural, it's best to draw each hair from root to tip, following the direction of growth. Try to draw individual hairs with patience, and believe me, the result will be worth it. All the while, I keep checking the reference photo to identify darker patches and replicate them. Then I switch to a slightly darker yellow, it's butternut, and go back to the soft pink. At this stage, I keep layering different shades where needed. This helps shape the muzzle and adds a dimension. And of course, I'm still referencing the original photo throughout. You can now clearly see the whiskers appearing naturally. I go back to the butternut yellow on the forehead and between the eyes, applying just a bit, as there is not much color in that area, but it helps with creating volume. Then comes granite rose. It's a very delicate, dusky pink that blends beautifully with all the previous colors, especially the yellows. It's ideal for golden cream fur. I apply it to both sides of the nose, and now all the colors start to look more cohesive. There are no sharp borders between them, they just blend very smoothly. The muzzle is finally starting to take its final form. I also apply a touch of cool grey very softly, gently, around the eye on the right side, and the same on the left side of our portrait. And the upper part of the nose has this cold grey tone. This light color works really well for that. We just calmly shade in the areas, and we add the color wherever it's needed. Personally, I like to work this way, not focusing only on the tiny detail, but rather working with the whole drawing at once. So, if I see a spot that needs a certain color, I just add it right away. There is nothing wrong with doing it like that. Let's move on to the nose. We will start with black. The easiest way is to begin with the nostrils. So, apply black there first. From the very beginning, you can press the pencil firmly against the paper. The goal here is to achieve an even, deep black layer. There shouldn't be any visible graininess. It should be smooth, uniform, and very intense. Using the same color, mark the darkest areas of the nose. The best technique is to use small circular motions. This will really help building the nose structure right from the start. If you look closely, you will notice the nose is made up of these small, somewhat rounded but not perfectly spherical shapes, like hexagons, pentagons, or soft circular forms that create the surface of the nose. And now let's move to the bridge of the nose. Here too, we mark the darkest areas, but leave the spots where light will be reflected later on. The next color is light blue, which I apply mainly along the bridge and at the bottom of the nostrils, basically wherever the light hits. Next, we use a slightly more intense shade, Ultramarine. I shade it over the bridge and at the front part of the nose. While I'm at it, I also add this color to both eyes, in the spots where I want to show light reflections or highlights. Then we move on to dark indigo. With this, we create texture or cracks on the nose and apply it to the darkest areas as well. Since I accidentally shaded over a spot that was supposed to stay white, I use an eraser to fix that mistake. And now we go back to the nostrils. You can already see the nose structure starting to take shape quite nicely. The darkest part will be the bottom of the nose, and we are gradually building up the intensity here. At the same time, we want to get rid of the visible graininess, so we smooth it out layer by layer. While we are at it, we can also sketch in the darkest hairs around the nose and along the top part. Slowly, the nose is beginning to take on a more three-dimensional form. I also mark the groove in the center of the nose. That one also needs to be very deep, intense black. Remember to apply the layers using small circular motions and to leave out the areas where the light will reflect, just below the nostrils and the tip of the nose. Now I move on to drawing the area under the nose. There are lots of tiny dark grey hairs here, and I will draw them using Payne's grey. This color makes it easier to capture the look of those hairs. Since we already marked the lightest hair at the beginning, drawing the darker ones now is just a formality. Now I switch to sepia 10%, which is a grey with a slight purplish tint. Lightly mark a layer of individual hairs where the darkest spots are, the ones from which the whiskers grow. Do the same on the other side, just under the nose. And again, I'm using Payne's grey here, and this time we can press the pencil a bit harder. While you are at it, start sketching the chin area too. I recommend doing it in a few layers. Don't go too dark at once. It's better to build the shading up gradually and with patience. And now I'm using grey number 3. It's a cool toned grey. This one is for shading the muzzle itself. A helpful tip to keep the pencil sharp longer is to gently rotate it while you draw. This way, the tip wears down more evenly. Now, using a light blue, I add a gentle touch to the nose and in the lightest spots. The next color is brownish beige, and I apply it to the front part of the muzzle. It's a warm tone between brown and soft orange, perfect for those subtle beige highlights. I apply a thin layer to the left and right side of the nose, matching the stroke length to the length of the hairs. And now I go back to Payne's grey. I add some individual hairs to the upper lip and darken the front part of the muzzle, that area just under the nose. This is how we calmly build up layer after layer, which gives the muzzle its three-dimensional look. Take your time, there is no need to rush. Also, never brush away pencil or eraser crumbs with your hand or try to blow them off the paper, because that can smudge your drawing and it might be hard to fix. It's better to use a soft brush, nothing fancy, even a regular makeup brush will do. A powder brush is perfect for this because it's soft, white and ideal for gently sweeping away any bits without damaging your portrait. Now the next color is cinnamon. You don't need much of it, just a little goes a long way, but it adds a noticeable effect. Use it to emphasize all the darker areas on the muzzle. It helps gradually create the impression of a soft, fluffy fur. Look closely at your reference photo, analyze it, and pick out the darkest spots. Observe how the hairs are arranged in those areas and try to replicate that in your drawing. Don't press the pencil too hard. Keep the strikes light and gentle. This little pup is lit quite strongly from above, so the fur on the top of the head and back should be drawn softly using light shades. Remember to look at your reference photo as often as possible. If you are aiming to create a realistic drawing, it's much easier to do it based on one or more reference photos than from memory. Our memory can be pretty unreliable, and chances are that drawing won't look as realistic as we would like it to if we rely on it too much. Let's add a little yellow to the upper part. We are using it now to blend all the previous colors together. We are creating a soft layer and placing it on top. This will act like a binder between the other colors. It helps everything to come together and creates smooth transitions between each color. All the blends will be soft, giving a sense of harmony and cohesion. Just remember, even when using a pencil for blending, you still need to pay attention to the direction and length of the fur strokes. This is something we always need to stick to, because if you use long strokes in areas where the fur should be short, the effect will be off. Where the fur is short, the strokes should be short. Where it's long, the strokes should be long. If we look at the muzzle and at the top of the head, the fur at the top is noticeably longer. And now let's move to the ear. The easiest way is to start with the darkest areas. Here I am using a pencil called Brownish Orange. I started at the edge of the ear and marked the shadow between the ear and the cheek. It's a small section. There aren't many dark hairs there, but even so, it will play a big role in building the sense of three-dimensionality. Mark all the shadows you can see on the ear. So keep checking your reference photo and make sure to mark all the darkest areas. The color I choose is a medium brown tone, and I would avoid starting with the darkest pencil here. For this stage, it's better to use a mid-tone. Where the fur on the ear is lighter, we simply leave those areas untouched. We already marked out all the lightest strands at the beginning, so those will stay as they are. There is no need to worry about them. Our goal now is to define the shadows and the darkest strands of fur. This will make the next stages much easier, and we go ahead and apply this color over the entire ear. Now that we've roughly mapped out the fur structure, we switch pencils to a pink one. The same shade we used earlier on the muzzle. We apply it loosely, following the direction of the previous layer. Now we move on to Granite Rose, which is a pinkish color. Most of the ear is made up of different shades of pinks and browns, and that's what we will mainly be working with here. Apply the color gently in a thin layer. I add it to the top of the head and also to the right side. The visible part of the ear on the right is much smaller, so we will save that for later. The colors should blend smoothly into one another. Everything should transition softly and harmoniously. And all throughout this step, remember to keep the layer light. A good trick for this is to hold the pencil a bit farther from the tip. If you want more intense, define lines with stronger pressure, hold the pencil closer to the tip. Now we use burnt sienna to mark the darkest areas. It's more intense than that first shade, that mid-tone we used at the beginning. And here you can already see how depth is starting to build. We are trying to capture the way the strands of hair flow. This will make the ear look very natural, and the hair will appear like a cascading flow. So notice that the lower part of the ear is slightly curled. These are the kinds of details we really need to pay attention to. We aim to capture and replicate them because they are what truly affect the final result. They are what give the drawing that realistic, natural look. That's where the real secret lies, in those tiny elements that determine whether the drawing feels lifelike or not. Now the apricot color, and I apply it pretty loosely now in a thin layer. At this stage, I'm not focusing too much on individual strokes anymore, just softly laying it over the top. Then I go back to the pink and add it to the lighter areas of the head. Now I use sepia 10% to shade the top of the head above the ear. This color isn't typical gray, it has a subtle violet tint, which works great for defining shadows. Next comes ochre. I apply it according to our reference photo, focusing on the areas with the most golden tones, mostly in the central part. And now a light 10% shade, it goes over the top, softening that previous intense yellow a bit. And now back to burnt sienna. It goes right where the ear falls, because that area was missing some detail. We can take a bit of time now to work on those spots, add the color wherever it's lacking. Remember, this is how we create depth. This is how the fur will start to look fluffy, because all of the subtle variations in tones. The contrast between the darkest and the lightest areas plays a huge role here. And just like that, we are calmly building it up layer by layer. As you can see, the ear is already starting to look really nice. We can use the same color on the muzzle as well. And like I mentioned earlier, whenever I notice a spot that's missing a certain color, I just go back and add it in. Personally, this is the method that works best for me. I have completed hundreds of portraits, and this approach feels the most comfortable and effective. Now, with that same color, I'm going to add some shadow on the head, but I'm doing it very gently. Using a dark sepia pencil, I'm creating a shadow between the ear and the muzzle, and also between the ear and the paw. I do this with soft, circular motions rather than vertical lines. That way, the effect will be much smoother. Now I'm picking out all the darkest areas and gradually layering in this color. Building it up slowly is much safer than applying it too heavily right away, because if we make a mistake, it's going to be much harder to fix. I also wanted to share with you my latest discovery. It's the Holbein Cork pencil. It's a shade somewhere between yellow and beige with just a touch of pink. It's perfect for adding softness to the fur. In our case, it has the ideal tone for creating the little hairs on the head. I had already marked some lighter hairs here earlier, so I don't need to worry about covering them. I'm gently layering this color in the shape of the head, and I'm always paying attention to the direction of the fur. Where the fur is longer, I use longer pencil strokes. At this stage, I skip the claws, since they will be filled in with a different color a bit later. I am already starting to shape the paw here. While I'm at it, I can also start working on the upper part and roughly define its shape. Now I switch to a beige tone and start marking the individual toes. I indicate where the claws will be, outline the paw pads and claws, and define the top of the paw. Now I switch to cocoa colored pencil to draw the spaces between the toes. I use the same cocoa color to capture the little hairs around the paw pads and to fill in the pads themselves. Try to keep this first layer as even as possible. That wraps up the first stage of drawing the paw. Now I move on to cold grey number 6. It's a dark grey with a bluish undertone. I apply it to the darkest areas, and here I can press a bit harder. But still remember to use small circular motions. With sepia 10%, we mark the claws. This shade is a soft grey with a slight purple tint. I'm using cold grey number 2 and add shadows on the left side. These are the ones between the paw and the head. Since there is no clearly defined fur texture on the paw, rely mostly on the color patches visible in the reference photo. I apply the color in soft, even layers. Now I'm creating the shadow beneath the paw and building it up with several layers. Remember, no rush, keep using circular strokes. At the same time, I can mark the shadow by the muzzle and underneath it. The closer it is to the muzzle, the darker it should be. The farther it extends, the light it becomes. We start with the darkest areas and then add more color as needed. We can also darken the chin a little more, since that shadow was missing earlier. And now we move on to the right ear and repeat exactly what we did before. Using Payne's grey, I add shadows on the claws, on paw pads, and I can also bring a bit of that same color to the edge where the paw meets the ear. Remember to always apply shadows horizontally and never vertically. It wouldn't look very natural. Now I'm using dark sepia for the darkest spots on the paw pads. I also use this color to emphasize the little hairs that overlap the pads, which creates a much more natural effect. Here I am using very short, tiny strokes. Add this color in the same way wherever the shadows are most intense, between the paws and the ear, and also between the ear and the cheek. Now we move on to the next color. It's called Brownish Beige. It's a beige with a slight brown tint, perfect for creating soft transitions between the darkest areas and the lighter ones. It's a great mid-tone, and we use it wherever we want to gently darken the fur, like on the nose, the side of the nose, and on the forehead between the eyes. You will notice there are slightly darker patches or shadows in those areas. The same applies above the eye. And just like that, we are starting to define the final stages of our puppy's muzzle. Now, take a closer look at the top of the forehead. You will notice the fur on the top of the head, and on the back it's very light. It almost has a glowing look. It's as if the light reflects off the strands of white fur, creating a shiny, radiant effect. So, at this point, all our attention is focused on the face. The rest of the body is just softly suggested. Now, on the brightest areas, we add white pencil. I'm using Caran Museum for the light strands on the ear and Faber-Castell white for the back. The first one is great because you can apply it over other colors and it still shows up, which is quite rare for colored pencils. That's why I really recommend it for finishing details. It's perfect for those final touches on fur. Now we are moving to the very last details, which is adding highlights in the eyes. I use a white Posca marker for this. It's really great for capturing those shiny reflections in the eyes and the moist look of the nose. Just add tiny dots wherever the lights hit. You can also add a few extra whiskers on the muzzle and above the eyes. I noticed there is still a bit of black missing on the nose, so I will add that where needed as well. Thank you so much for watching my very first drawing tutorial. This is a special moment for me, as I get to share with you something I truly love. I hope this video was helpful and inspired you to explore your own creative path. If you enjoyed it, I would be really grateful if you gave me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It will mean a lot to me and motivate me to keep creating more content. New videos are coming very soon, where I will be sharing more tips, experiences and little artistic tricks that might make your drawing journey a bit easier. And if you have any questions, are curious about something or just want to chat about art, leave a comment. I would love to respond and exchange ideas with you. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.